Welcome back to a new episode of Mic'd Up With Mass. This is our monthly podcast on all things mobile UA. So, the last 1 year has seen many interesting developments in the way we work, the way we work out, or even the way the young are getting schooled. And today's topic is around EdTech. So, EdTech has emerged as a force of reckoning as many schools moved online and people spent more time upgrading their skills. Today, we have with us Michael Nago, country manager of Elsa Corp, a rising star startup founded in San Francisco by Vietnamese with office in Lisbon and Ho Chi Minh City. Welcome, Michael, to our podcast today.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here, and thank you for inviting me to come chat with you guys.
And joining him in this discussion is Ankit Raval, Senior Director of Sales and Marketing at Mass. Welcome also to you, Ankit, and over to you.
Thanks, Diksha. Really excited for this episode. Education is something which has always excited me, and I always remember that a teacher is someone who really takes your hand, opens your mind, and then touches your heart. And today, education, as you rightly said, Diksha, is moving online. So really excited to have you, Michael, to discuss about educational trends and how in this new normal that is also moving online. So looking forward for a discussion today.
Absolutely. Excited.
Cool. So, Michael, before we get started, it would be great if you can share a little bit to our listeners about your organization and your background and your work you are doing at Elsa Corp.
Sure. I work for an organization called Elsa Speak. Elsa is not the Disney character. It's an acronym, actually, for English Language Speech Assistant. And our mission is to empower the 1.5 billion English learners across the world to speak English fluently and, more importantly, confidently, so that they can unlock opportunities in their lives. And we do this by leveraging AI to drastically reduce the price of a speech coach. And so what would cost you about a few $100s an hour with a live speech coach, we can reduce that to just $45 a year using Elsa. And I've joined Elsa for about a year now, serving as a country manager for our largest market, Vietnam. We have 14 million users globally, a little bit over 5 million of which are in Vietnam itself.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I guess a little bit about me. Prior to joining Elsa, I was leading Southeast Asia marketing for a US-based SaaS data analytics company based out of Singapore. And prior to that, I was a co-founder of a VC-backed mobile marketplace and logistics startup in Vietnam.
Interesting. So you have a great vantage point of what's happening in general in the startup ecosystem, whether in Vietnam or in Southeast Asia.
Absolutely. I've been in Southeast Asia since 2007. So I've been here. I feel it's more like home here than back home in the States.
Interesting. Cool. I think you touched about a very interesting thing. I want to double click a little bit at the moment on Elsa Corp, right? Because English as a language, believe it or not, at least in emerging markets, has become the business language. It is the language of the internet to even pop culture, and is the language which is universally understood, at least when you are traveling globally. In fact, from what I see here in India, and I'm sure the number of users of your app in Vietnam further corroborates that it is the ticket for meaningful employment and even getting an edge over certain kind of jobs. And interestingly, a funny anecdote, in India, we had this movie which I think came out in 2012 called English Winglish, where the protagonist is trying to learn English and to speak better just to conform to her parent-teachers association meeting of a daughter or get admitted to a certain club within US. So English as a passport to success has always been there, and I think what technology has done is made it a little bit more app driven, more AI driven. So can you talk a little bit about some of these consumer trends you see in Vietnam or in general, about who those users are who are trying to learn English and what is their core objective to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, due to the pandemic, a lot of learning has come online, and not even that, just work has gone online, right? So before, when you had the opportunity to meet in person, you can use non-verbal cues and different ways of communicating to get your ideas across. But then nowadays, when you're sitting in front of web call after web call after web call, the ability, the importance of English becomes even more pronounced because you're relying only on your voice. And sometimes you have video on, sometimes you don't, right? And so being able to be understood becomes super, super important. And also, besides that, the confidence to actually even try is also paramount. So I think those trends have just been kind of exacerbated by the pandemic. And I think even after the pandemic kind of subsides, not everybody's going to go back to work in the office. There's going to be a fair amount of working remotely, working from home, and this will just continue on forward. And even when it comes to schools, there's going to be a significant portion of hybrid learning going on after this as well. So I think that the trends that the pandemic has brought forward is definitely going to stick around post pandemic. It's just a question of to what extent.
Interesting. And curious, like during the lockdown, and I know as we speak, we have a lockdown in Vietnam, in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi. Are you seeing that there's English learning classes which used to happen previously offline has moved online? And do you think it will stick even when the world and Vietnam starts opening up?
Yeah, so a lot of schools have been forced to either adapt or die, right? So it's been pretty Darwinian this last year. A lot of people are moving online, and I mean the great thing that the pandemic has brought is a kind of a mass acceptance, probably by force for students and parents to accept the quality of online teaching. And the benefit of it too is price, right? So as you move things online, as you're able to scale more appropriately, price comes down, and when price comes down, it becomes much more accessible to people. So I think it will definitely stick around. When it comes to learning, there's a lot of ways. There's things that just can't be replaced by face-to-face learning, and so that's why I think hybrid learning will pick up, as a home part or an augmentation or an improvement or an additional means of engagement for teachers and stuff like that. So I think it'll definitely stick around. It may not be as 100%. I definitely won't be 100% online as now, but it definitely stick around for sure.
Cool. Let's drill down this a little better. So help me understand, like, who are the biggest audiences or profiles of users who are learning English through the Elsa app? Are these more college students or say school students, or these are people who are looking for better job employment, or what is the mix of users today you see on your app in Vietnam?
Yeah, I mean, I can't share too much specifics, but I can say that a majority of our users in Vietnam specifically tend to be a bit older. So we kind of call this segment a early to mid-career professionals. So English for them is a way to secure a new job or secure a promotion or to advance themselves. We are seeing increasingly a growing segment of younger learners, and that's due to a lot of the new content we have coming out, focusing on helping students improve their IELTS scores. And so as that comes down, we're starting to see a bigger distribution of younger. It usually tends to be around high school to college age, around there.
Got it. Interesting. And curious, how do you think approach then to do user acquisition for this kind of a varied audience, right? Because you mentioned you have school kids, maybe pre-teens and post-teens to college to early jobbers, etc. So curious, any insights or learnings of how are you approaching user acquisition for this category, and has that also changed in the last 12 to 14 months during the pandemic?
Yeah, so Vietnam's a pretty challenging market when it comes to apps, especially for subscription based, and that's a big reason for that is credit card penetration is around 4%, debit cards are about 26-27%, around there. And so and that's just actual debit cards, but people who actually had the ability and set up to pay, it sinks even more. So we always have two segments. Traditionally, we typically focus on the higher age segments, the young professionals to mid-career professionals, purely for the ability to monetize. However, due to the pandemic, what we did find is that we wanted to open it up, our technology, not to just this segment, but also open it up to. It's been open up to everybody, but we make it more appealing. And so as kind of lockdowns set in, even before we put a lot of effort into it, we saw there's a huge spike in user activity, as well as organic user acquisition. And so I think during the last 12 months, I'll speak for ourselves, but I think for a lot of other people as well, at least in the short term, there was probably a shift in goals from worrying about monetization versus growing that user base, because there is this opportunity and a huge demand for online learning during this time. So I think that's in the past 12 to 14 months, that's kind of where we put some additional focus.
Okay, interesting. Great. I think any early learnings on how do you solve the whole issue around monetization? Because you rightly said the credit card penetration is very poor, and if you zoom out, this is the case across other emerging markets, whether it is in Indonesia or here in India or even Brazil. So curious, any learnings which Elsa has to figure out the right way to monetize this kind of an audience where credit card penetration is poor? Are you looking at, say, cash on delivery? Are you looking at coupons and vouchers which people can buy at the retailers, mom and pop stores?
Yeah, exactly. We're pretty much following a similar model to top line. We're following a similar model like what Spotify and Netflix does, which allows purchases through web. And in terms of how do we get and those purchases are essentially vouchers, right? And traditionally pre-COVID, a lot of our revenue came from vouchers, and about 80% of which was actually COD. Now, we're not post-COVID yet, but now during COVID, or kind of the tail end of COVID now, we're seeing as high as 40%, depending on the month, of purchases being online payments. So the pandemic has definitely brought about more of a boom to online payments and people going cashless, relying less on COD. And that's really great for us. We're super excited to see that, because it allows us to reinvest money in areas that are more important to our business rather than COD.
Got it. Interesting. Reminds me of what Albert Einstein once said, that you can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking you used to create in the first time. So interestingly, like where you don't have credit card penetrations, these new channels of payments, whether it is vouchers, whether it is COD, or now online payments, are trying to really solve where credit card penetration is. So absolutely, I think you can't solve problems by the same thinking which you created in the first place. Cool. So let's change track a little bit, right? So while obviously you are in the space of imparting English skills to users, and any idea like what's happening in the EdTech space, right? Because again, at least from where we see in India, in Southeast Asia, EdTech has been booming in the last 12 to 18 months across sector, whether it is K-12, whether it is academic learning or test preparation. So how is that happening in Vietnam?
Yeah, there's a lot of EdTech solutions out right now in the market, and the majority of them are focusing on live classes, which I think it's really great. It's a great opportunity to engage a wider audience. Obviously, with the pandemic like this, not having to be in classes. It's also, I think, long-term wise, it's a great opportunity for students who I'm really hoping at universities that adopt such technologies, because that would allow students who can't move across the country to study online and to participate in a one of the top universities. So I think that's a big space, and whether it's full solutions of offering online classes, or it's solutions like SaaS solutions that have enabled universities to have digital classes and then different features to improve that experience. There's a lot of investment on those ends.
Got it. And again, I think like what you are saying, that the hybrid would be the model post pandemic. You see the same thing will spill over to all these subcategories of education. So whether it is K-12 or test preparation, which is happening, you see that all will become like a hybrid model where the classes may happen online, and then offline is more about engagement, doubt clearance, peer learning, so on and so forth.
Yeah, exactly. I think it doesn't matter if it's K-12 or maybe K would be a bit too young, but kids these days are are pretty well versed in iPads just from early
Tell
days.
me about it. I have a 5-year-old, and she sometimes amazes me with her understanding of app knowledge than even I do. So I
Exactly.
bet, I think.
But I mean, I
Cool.
think we see it as super exciting because I think there's special things that can be added from this digital perspective, right? A big, for at least for Vietnam, a big restriction or a big hurdle to roll out English nationwide amongst public schools is that the training of the teachers isn't where it needs to be, and so that's where we at Elsa are super excited to work with companies that provide those digital services so that we can plug in our technology into their platform so that we can help teachers teach English even if they don't have the perfect accent. They're able to leverage our technology to augment their lessons so the children will get the examples they need in order to learn to be successful moving forward as well.
Got it. Got it. Cool. So let's change track a little bit and just zoom out and understand a little bit about the startup ecosystem, right? So people hear a lot about obviously the Silicon Valley of late here in India, which we now call Tech Hully. We've heard things happening in Indonesia. Curious what's happening in the startup ecosystem at Vietnam, and you being a prior entrepreneur, obviously you can bring a lot of insights and nuances of what you have seen say the last 5 years or 10 years. So share a little bit about that. What's happening in Vietnam startup ecosystem?
Yeah, the Vietnam startup ecosystem it's exciting right now. It's a super exciting time. There's a lot of attention. I mean, on both sides. So on many fronts. So the government is spending a lot of effort and money sort of building Vietnam. There's a government initiative to produce 10 unicorns out of Vietnam by 2030, and so there's even
Wow.
there's government regulations on how to make technology transfers easier, setting up companies faster. As a point of reference, starting up a company in Singapore, including all banking and everything, takes about 2 weeks. In Vietnam, it takes 3 months. And so they're making significant forward efforts to reduce that with a lot of tax incentives, etc. So that's really great.
Really getting rid of a lot of red tape which used to happen in the past, which is quite encouraging because I've not heard this, for example, happening here in India or even Indonesia.
Yeah, exactly. So it's super exciting. So the government is pushing behind it, and then on the investment side or the funding side, right? There's a lot of new funds coming in, rushing to get in. I think last year Vietnam had overthrown Singapore as raising the most funds or something. I believe I can't remember exactly, and which is quite encouraging. I think there was something about 800 million or something invested in startups last year, which is huge for us.
Any particular sector these funds are gravitating to? Education, health, SaaS, or gaming, for example, is quite big. So any particular sector which is garnering a lot of these funds?
Yeah, so I mean, the number sounds huge. It's fairly lopsided, to be fair and frank about it. A lot of it goes to e-commerce, which is huge in Vietnam, as well as a fintech. So some of the big guys who got the money were Tiki, Momo, VNPay. However, we are starting to see a lot of growth in other sectors as well. I think B2B would be a big sector for Vietnam coming up.
Got it.
B2B.
And anything around gaming, because interestingly within Southeast Asia, if you talk about which is like the gaming Mecca where a lot of games are being developed, a lot of gaming studio has their outpost there, Vietnam always figures out there. So anything interesting happening in the gaming space, either for consumers within Vietnam or obviously outside. And the story which comes to my mind is the Flappy Birds, which happened, a phenomena I think in 2012, 2013. But after that, you don't seen a global IP or some success. So anything around that, Michael?
Yeah, I think in markets, Vietnam and Southeast Asia at large, casual gaming is going to be always going to be huge because to be honest, it's the biggest especially for certain groups. It's the biggest form of entertainment, right? And games, such that it has such a big volume of players. Mobile advertising on those games becomes very, very, very lucrative as well, because monetizing games through items and stuff like that. Southeast Asia is going to be fairly difficult because of a lot of different payment gateways and whatnot. In terms of the gaming, I mean, they're pretty big publishers in Vietnam. I think are quite interesting. Like Eminotes, there's quite a lot of like music related type of games, and they set out from the very beginning. They knew that monetizing in app would be very difficult, and so they built their whole business all around building games that have a max capacity, or that can garner a lot of players to run advertising. I think in terms of other gaming, though, I mean, there's the other element of esports building up. Esports around the world is getting obviously very, very big. In Asia, it's big, and it's starting to become accepted as like a legitimate job in a fairly traditional country or region. Actually, there's a lot of in Vietnam. There's government initiatives actually to promote esports as young as college. So formal groups, formal teams, everything like that as well. So I think that's going to be
interesting fun fact that now esports is like a medal event in the Asia sports, which happens, the Asian Games, which will happen in 2022. Esports is one of the medal events which is going to happen. So you're right. I think globally, in China particularly, people are realizing the value of esports, and also not just like from a fun perspective, but also from an employment perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Some of the good players here. Correct. Exactly. Great. Actually, let's change tracks a little bit, and I think you also alluded it around the whole thing around AI and machine learning and how it has impacted every business. Right? Incidentally, I had hosted a panel last month where we spoke about how AI and machine learning is impacting really the whole digital marketing space, whether it is stumbling upon new customer segments or it is around making your measurement much more effective, your channel orchestration much better. So curious, how are you looking at AI machine learning in your segment? How is it helping? Any examples of use cases around that?
So the question is, how are we using AI?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, for Elsa. Yeah, I mean, from the very early days where we saw the capability of AI and helping people learn and be more proficient in English, and so now we're always looking to ways to how do we expand that reach, right? Because we have a goal of reaching 1.5 billion users, 1.5 billion learners, and that's very, very big. So we'll be looking at things like how do we help companies, HR departments recruit more efficiently. So building our AI and our speech recognition and proficiency into a test that can be taken during the recruitment process. Mm-hmm. We've been doing that to offer it up to partners. We're looking at other ways, working with...
So curious, is Elsa looking to say outsource this machine learning capability around speech for in the HR and education tech? Like think of what say Nuance was doing in the health tech sector, which recently got bought over by Microsoft, or something on those lines?
That's right. So, I mean, we're open. That's something that we've been doing ourselves, but we also have our technology as an API available. So we've been talking to a few different partners. One would be like an online digital class. So, say for instance, traditionally, if a teacher asks a student to repeat a word, she would have to go one by one. So what if now you have a bunch of digital class, you put a word up, and then each kid will speak into their own microphone and be given personalized results that the teacher can then look at the summary. So it's all these different ways to enhance that, right?
Interesting. Cool. I think that was really helpful, Michael. And now maybe again, let's change tracks and get to know you a little better than say Elsa or what's happening in the ecosystem. So we call it the rapid fire round in our episode, where we will try to ask you questions and you have to respond in not more than 10 to 15 words, so that it's top of mind. Cool. So the first question I have for you is, if you are not an entrepreneur, what would you have been?
I would have been running a workshop, a car workshop, or a mechanic. I really like building things, cars specifically.
Interesting. So have you modified your own car?
I have. I do, and I have something I've been doing since I was 15 years old.
Interesting. I should let my Vietnamese team know about this. They're based in Ho Chi Minh. Cool. Any particular quote you live by?
There's a quote by Paul Graham. I live by this. I used it a lot when I started my own co-founded my startup. Do things that don't scale.
Got it. Do things that don't do things which don't scale, or do things which scale?
Do things that don't scale. So I think the thing here is to focus first on what makes something sticky and then worry about scaling it later.
Got it. Interesting. Which one daily habit has been a game changer for you?
Well, once you have kids, you're up early every day. So that was one. That was more by force, though. I think one thing that I do has been pretty impactful for me is I start the day doing the hard things first. Wake up, get all that stuff done, and then the rest of the day, I have time to do more thinking and to put out day-to-day fires.
Got it. Define Michael in one word.
Beta, in progress.
Interesting. Never settle, in progress. Cool. That resonates with me a lot. Cool. So, Michael, it was really great chatting with you to understand Elsa, to understand the EdTech ecosystem, the Vietnamese ecosystem, what's happening, and again, the vantage point you are in the thick of action. So, I'm sure this will be really helpful for our listeners, and then also how EdTech changing really during the pandemic, and how the future will be much more hybrid. And more importantly, how machine learning is able to scale things. Interesting examples you shared. So as we close, any parting thoughts for our listeners? Anything, if I am a budding entrepreneur in Vietnam, in the Southeast Asia region, or even if I'm someone who's outside the region, say in the US or Western Europe, and thinking to come down to Vietnam, any parting thoughts for them?
Yes, I'd always invite anybody to come in. There's a lot of opportunities, but with that, there are a lot of challenges as well. So if you come with an open mind, open heart, and be ready to pivot as much as you need to. I've always kept my door open, so anybody's able to reach out to me. So feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn if you need some advice or help or anything like that. Always willing to lend a hand.
Oh, great. I think that sums up well for the overall thought that I think during this pandemic, as you rightly said, it is the capability and how can you pivot rather than capability, which is going to determine your success, and more so during such unprecedented times. So great, Michael. It was really an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope you also enjoyed.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me to this as well, and I hope you stay safe.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ankit and Michael. Rightly said that the pandemic has brought mass acceptance by force for online teaching, and the future of education is going to be hybrid. It's going to be an interesting space to look out for as the world settles into the new normal. With that, we are at the end of today's podcast. Until next time.